Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Houston shone in the setting sun, its gleaming skyscrapers reflecting the wealth of the oil industry for which it was famous. In the upscale neighborhoods, imposing mansions stood guarded by perfectly trimmed hedges and state-of-the-art cameras. It was in one of these gilded worlds that Olivia Carter, a tireless housekeeper, spent her days cleaning, tidying and serving the wealthy. Olivia wasn't born into extreme poverty, but life had never been kind to her. Widowed for several years, she was raising her 2 children alone, Maya and Ethan, with patience and love. Every penny earned represented an effort, a battle against bills, rent, and school expenses. Despite the difficulties, she always kept her head high, refusing to give in to discouragement. That evening, after finishing work in the lavish penthouse of Richard Hawthorne, one of the most powerful oil tycoons in the country, Olivia thought she was simply going home. But Richard was waiting for her in the lobby, a strange glint in his eyes. "Olivia," he said in a calm but authoritative voice, "I have an unusual proposition." Olivia frowned, her hands still clutching the rag she was holding. "A proposition? For me?" she said suspiciously. Richard smiled, a mixture of charm and mystery in his eyes. "Yes. I invite you to become my wife, for one night." Olivia felt her breath catch. The word woman hung in the air, heavy with innuendo and intrigue. She felt anger boil, indignation and curiosity intertwining. Was this a provocation? A tasteless joke? Or something more complex, deeper, that she wasn't yet ready to understand? What Olivia didn't know was that tonight wouldn't just be a game of wealth and power. It would open the door to a world she'd never dared to imagine, a world where dignity, solitude, and human truth would reveal themselves in unexpected nuances. And that, for the first time in her life, a single decision would change her destiny. The sun had barely set over Houston when Olivia left her friend's apartment and headed to the penthouse. Richard Hawthorne, she knew the man by reputation, a charismatic but cold and distant oil tycoon, capable of negotiating billions while maintaining an icy smile. Yet, that evening, it was her he had asked to see, and that did not bode well. When she entered the vast, bright foyer, Richard was there, leaning against the glass railing overlooking the living room. He was wearing a perfectly tailored dark suit, and his gaze, usually distant, was curious, almost human. "Olivia," he said softly but authoritatively, "thank you for coming." Olivia stood there, her hands clasped around the bag she was holding. Part of her wanted to run away, the other part wanted to understand what was happening. "You asked me, for what exactly?" she asked cautiously. Richard took a step toward her, his smile both mysterious and reassuring. "An unusual proposition. I would like you to become my wife for one night." Olivia felt her heart race. Her eyes widened, and a blush rose to her cheeks. "Are you kidding?" she said, trying to hide her anger and surprise. "No," Richard replied calmly. "I'm not looking for anything vulgar or indecent, I assure you. It's an experience. A moment to understand someone beyond appearances, beyond titles and wealth." Olivia took a step back. The words echoed strangely in her head. There was a sincerity in his voice she would never have imagined coming from a man of her world. "And why me?" she asked, curiosity piercing her suspicion. "Because you're different," Richard said. "You're not pretending. You have a dignity and strength I've never seen in anyone I've met. I want to see what it's like to be simply human, without power, without money, just real." Olivia remained silent. Part of her wanted to say no immediately. Another part, the one that secretly dreamed of a different world, wanted to accept, just to see. "All right," she said finally, her voice firm but calm. "I'll think about it." Richard tilted his head slightly and smiled. "Take all the time you need. But know that tonight could change a lot of things, for both of us." When she got home, Olivia felt tormented. Her children played in the living room, oblivious to this dilemma. Was this just another adventure in the gilded world of the rich, or the beginning of an encounter that would change her life? She placed her hand on the heart of mind of Ethan, feeling both fear and excitement. Tonight, a decision was brewing, a decision that could propel her into a universe where money, power, and human emotions were inextricably intertwined. The night wind drifted gently between the curtains of Olivia's modest apartment. Sitting on the sofa, she held a nearly cold cup of tea, her thoughts swirling like leaves blown by a storm. Richard Hawthorne's proposal kept revolving in her mind: become his wife, for one night. Her fingers nervously played with the handle of the cup. Was this a trap? A way for him to amuse himself at the expense of someone like her? Or was there really something deeper behind this unexpected gesture? Olivia shook her head. She wasn't naive. Her life experience had prepared her to see the hidden agendas, the traps behind smiles and compliments. "Mom, are you okay?" asked Maya, her 8-year-old daughter, appearing in the living room with her tangled hair and curious eyes. Olivia smiled softly, erasing her worries from her face. "Yes, my dear," she replied, "but I have some important things to think about." Ethan, her 12-year-old son, joined her, frowning. "Is this about the rich man?" he asked, unwittingly guessing the echo of her thoughts. "Perhaps," Olivia replied cautiously, and she felt a weight on her shoulders. This wasn't a simple decision. Accepting what he was proposing could change their lives, or put them in an uncomfortable situation. Olivia spent the rest of the evening thinking. She thought about her children, her safety, her dignity, her reputation. But something else was rising up: curiosity. This desire to understand why a man like Richard, powerful and immensely rich, had chosen to take an interest in her, a simple cleaning lady. Images overlapped in her mind: the sumptuous penthouse, the glittering chandeliers, the walls covered in artwork, and him, with that gaze that seemed to search beyond appearances. Olivia knew she couldn't reject this invitation without first exploring what lay beneath. Finally, after a restless night of thoughts and imaginary scenarios, Olivia made a decision. She would accept the invitation, but in her own way, with her own rules, her dignity intact. She wouldn't just be a toy or an object of curiosity, she would be herself, authentic and strong. The next morning, she rose early, determined. She took care of her children, made breakfast, and promised herself that tonight would be a test for Richard, for herself, and perhaps for what life could offer when one dared to cross the threshold between two such different worlds. For the first time in a long time, Olivia felt a flicker of excitement mixed with fear: the night ahead might just change her life. The next morning, Olivia woke with a mixture of nervousness and curiosity. In the kitchen, the sun filtered through the curtains, illuminating the modest table where she had set breakfast for Maya and Ethan. Her children chattered happily, oblivious to the decision weighing on their mother. Olivia smiled at them, but in her mind, hers was far away, already immersed in the world of Richard Hawthorne. After sending the children off to school, Olivia went to her small room to think about how she would present herself. This wasn't just a meeting, it was an entrance into a world she had never dared to imagine. She wanted to be dignified, elegant, but still remain herself, without unnecessary artifice. She pulled out a simple but refined dress she had bought for a special occasion, a midnight blue gown that hugged her figure without being provocative. She applied light makeup, highlighting her expressive eyes and natural smile. Her hair was carefully styled, falling in soft waves over her shoulders. Every gesture was a statement: she was not simply a maid, but a person with her own worth, her own dignity. As she looked in the mirror, Olivia felt a mixture of fear and excitement. "I don't know what's going to happen there, but I'll be myself," she told herself, breathing deeply to calm her racing heart. Before leaving, she checked her bag one last time: phone, keys, wallet. She wondered what she was going to say, how she was going to behave. But one thought kept coming back: this night could be more than just a game of wealth and power. She could learn something about herself, and about him. In the taxi that took her to Richard's penthouse, Olivia watched the city pass by through the window. The skyscrapers shone like jewels in the growing night. She wondered what awaited her beyond the massive penthouse doors: a strange and superficial evening, or a profound and unexpected human experience. When the taxi finally stopped in front of the luxurious building, Olivia felt her heart race again. She took a deep breath and stepped out of the vehicle, ready to face this gilded world, ready to stay true to herself, no matter what Richard Hawthorne had planned for her. Olivia took the elevator to the top floor, her heart pounding. When the doors opened, she found herself in the penthouse lobby, bathed in the warm light of the lamps and the twinkling of the crystal chandeliers. The space was vast, tastefully decorated, every detail exuding richness and opulence. Richard stood by the bay window with his arms crossed, watching the illuminated city below. When he noticed Olivia, a small smile played on his lips. "Here you are at last," he said calmly, his voice ringing with assurance. Olivia swallowed, trying to calm the rising nervousness within her. She wasn't just impressed by the luxury of the place, it was his presence, imposing yet strange, that unnerved her. "Good evening," she replied, her voice firm despite the trembling in her heart. Richard took a step toward her, but he respected her distance, as if he wanted to establish a basis of trust. "Thank you for accepting," he said. "I know my offer was unusual." "You could say that," Olivia replied with a smirk. "But I'm curious to know what made you do it." Richard walked over to a coffee table where a few glasses and a carafe of wine sat. He poured two, handing one to Olivia. "Curiosity, honesty, and respect," he explained. "I want to understand what it's like to be someone who lives in a completely different world than me. And I want this moment not to be about money, power, or appearance. Just, the two of us, simply." Olivia took the glass, feeling the weight of his words. He wasn't trying to seduce her, not in a superficial way. It was deeper. Richard wanted to understand, to explore, without pressure or games. "Very well," she said finally, raising her glass slightly. "Then we'll see what tonight brings." They sat in the living room, chatting about everything and nothing at first, the city, travel, books. But soon, the conversation became more personal. Richard shared snippets of his life, his loneliness, his overwhelming responsibilities. Olivia spoke of her children, her daily challenges, and her dreams of a better life. Despite the difference in their worlds, a strange and unexpected bond began to form. They sometimes laughed, found themselves confiding in each other, discovering that behind wealth and poverty lay a common humanity. Olivia realized she had never met anyone like Richard Hawthorne, powerful, yet vulnerable when he spoke about himself. And Richard, for his part, discovered in Olivia a strength, honesty, and dignity that no contract or wealth could buy. The night promised to be more than just an experience, it would be the beginning of a mutual understanding, of a fragile but sincere bond between two worlds that seemed, at first glance, irreconcilable. As the evening wore on, the atmosphere in the penthouse had softened. Olivia and Richard sat on the sofa, a faint scent of fresh flowers wafting through the air, the dim lighting creating an intimate and soothing atmosphere. "You know, Olivia," Richard said, putting down his glass, "I've never met anyone who sees things with such clarity, such strength, without ever seeking to justify themselves," he continued. Olivia felt a warmth rise in her chest. He wasn't complimenting her like the rich, arrogant men she'd known. He saw her for real, not just as an object of curiosity. "I guess I don't really have a choice," she replied with a small smile. "Life has taught me to fight for what matters." Richard nodded, impressed by her honesty and resilience. There was something in her gaze, a depth that touched him. He found himself wanting to protect her, not out of pity, but out of respect and admiration. "It's fascinating," he said, almost to himself. "You're incredibly strong." Olivia looked away, embarrassed but flattered. She sensed something more subtle was happening between them, a silent exchange of emotions, a complicity that had nothing to do with money or power. They talked for a long time, sharing personal stories, childhood memories, sorrows, and joys. Olivia spoke of her children, her widowhood, and the sacrifices she had had to make for them. Richard recounted anecdotes from his childhood in a family of wealthy industrialists, the pressures he had experienced, and the loneliness that accompanied him despite his wealth. "I didn't think a simple conversation could be so revealing," Olivia murmured, as if she were discovering a new side of her own life by talking to him. Richard smiled. "Sometimes," he said, "true wealth isn't measured in dollars or possessions, but in moments like this, when honesty and truth are shared." Olivia felt a mixture of emotion and awe. She understood that this night was not only a test for Richard, but also for herself, a test of confidence, courage, and the ability to remain herself in the face of a world she had always considered inaccessible. As they moved toward a deeper understanding of each other, Olivia realized she had never felt such a connection with anyone. And Richard, for the first time in a long time, felt truly seen and understood, not for what he possessed, but for who he was. The night drew on, and with it the emergence of a fragile but sincere bond, capable of crossing social differences and the invisible barriers of wealth and poverty. Night had fallen completely, enveloping Houston in a veil of soft, golden light. Olivia and Richard remained in the living room, near the large bay window that offered a breathtaking view of the glittering city. The conversation had evolved to more personal, more intimate topics, and a subtle, almost electric tension hung in the air. Richard put down his glass and looked at Olivia with unusual frankness. "You know," he said, "I deeply respect the way you face life. You have a quiet strength that many don't have. And yet, I feel something in you that touches me deeply." Olivia felt a shiver run down her spine. It wasn't a superficial compliment, he truly saw who she was. She understood there was an attraction, but she reminded herself of her dignity and the reason she had agreed to this evening, to understand, to experience, to be herself. "Richard," she murmured measuredly, "I am not here to play a role, nor to give in to temptation." Richard smiled softly, fully understanding his limitations. "I'm not trying to seduce you against your will," he said. "It's not that. I just want us to be honest with each other, to see what it's like to simply be ourselves." Yet Olivia felt her heart beat faster. The attraction was real, but there was something deeper, mutual respect, genuine curiosity, and a desire to understand the other without manipulating or controlling. They moved a little closer, but never too close. Hands remained in place, their gazes meeting intensely. Richard gradually revealed his vulnerability, speaking of his loneliness despite his wealth, his fears, and his need for true connection. Olivia, touched by his honesty, felt a mixture of emotions of her own, empathy, admiration, and the beginnings of attraction she would never have thought possible for a man like him. "You're unlike anyone I've ever met," Richard said, almost to himself. "And that's exactly why I want to understand what it's like, to be with you, even just for tonight." Olivia nodded, finally understanding that this night wasn't just a game of wealth or power. It was a moment of human exploration, of discovery, where truth and sincerity took precedence over all else. She knew she had to stay true to herself, but she couldn't deny the rising anticipation, the strange excitement of feeling this unexpected connection with Richard Hawthorne. The night was shaping up to be even deeper and more revealing than she had imagined. The clock was striking midnight when the silence of the penthouse was broken only by the soft clinking of glasses and Olivia and Richard's steady breathing. The night had taken on a different rhythm, gentler, almost timeless. They were now sitting closer together on the sofa, a veil of dim light enveloping them. The conversation, until then punctuated by laughter and light-heartedness, had slipped into deeper confessions. Olivia spoke of her sacrifices, of the constant fear of not being able to give her children the life she wanted for them. Richard listened attentively, his eyes reflecting a sincerity Olivia had never encountered in a man of her world. "You are incredible," Richard murmured, almost to himself. "Your strength, your honesty, it's rare these days." Olivia looked down, touched but a little intimidated by the intensity of his words. "And you, Richard," she said after a moment, "you are much more human than I imagined. It seems that behind all this power and wealth, there is a man who seeks to be understood." Their eyes met, and for the first time, no social barriers seemed to exist. Olivia felt a new warmth, the certainty that this night would not only be an experience, but an encounter where emotions could be revealed without masks. Richard extended his hand, not to seduce, but to offer a gesture of trust and closeness. Olivia took it, feeling a subtle but undeniable connection. Words seemed unnecessary now, their silences spoke louder than any conversation. "I don't want tonight to be just a game," Richard said softly. "I want it to be real, even if it's only for a few hours." "So," Olivia said, a smile lighting up her face, "let's make it true." They shared confidences, laughter, and knowing silences. Every word, every gesture, every look forged a fragile but sincere bond between them. Olivia understood that she was not simply a guest in Richard's world, she had become a participant in a human experience, where truth, vulnerability, and connection were the only precious commodities. The night passed like this, gently, without rushing, without excess. And when the first glimmers of dawn appeared through the large bay windows, Olivia and Richard realized that they had shared much more than just an evening, they had shared a part of themselves. Olivia left the couch to prepare to leave, but one thing was clear: this night would remain etched in their memory, not as a frivolous adventure, but as the beginning of an unexpected understanding and connection between two worlds that seemed to oppose everything. The first light of morning filtered through the penthouse's floor-to-ceiling windows. The city of Houston was slowly waking up, but in the living room, an eerie calm persisted. Olivia, dressed in a simple but elegant dress, gathered her things, aware that the night was coming to an end. Richard sat on the couch, watching him silently. There was no pressure or expectations, just palpable respect and mutual recognition. "Olivia," he said softly, "I want to thank you, for your honesty, your courage, and for agreeing to share this moment with me." "Thank you," Olivia replied sincerely. "For being real, for not judging me, for seeing me as I am." A comfortable silence fell. Richard stood before her, his expression serious but gentle. "I know you need to get back to your lives, to your children, to your responsibilities. But know this, tonight wasn't just a game for me. It showed me what human connection truly means." Olivia felt her heart clench. That night had been more than just an unusual experience, it had opened a window into a world where authenticity and sincerity could exist, even between two people from radically different backgrounds. "I won't forget it," she said simply, a calm smile on her lips. Before leaving, Richard took out a small envelope and handed it to Olivia. "For you and your children," he said. "Nothing grand, just a gesture to show you that respect and admiration can also be translated into concrete actions." Olivia took the envelope, touched, but above all aware that it was not the money that mattered, it was the consideration and recognition of her human value. "Thank you, Richard," she murmured. I don't know how to describe what that night was like. But I know it will stay with me." He nodded silently, but the smile in his eyes spoke volumes. Olivia left the penthouse, her footsteps echoing down the hallway as the rising sun bathed the city in golden light. She returned home, her pockets a little lighter but her heart filled with newfound confidence and an unexpected sense of hope. For Richard, Olivia's departure left an unexpected void. He had discovered, through that night, that there were human connections worth more than all his riches. And for Olivia, the memory of that night would remain a reminder that dignity, sincerity, and courage could build bridges between worlds once separated. The days that followed were strangely calm for Olivia. The routine resumed, getting the children ready for school, cleaning, managing bills, and shopping. Yet a new feeling persisted, a kind of lightness mixed with curiosity. The night spent with Richard never left her mind. One morning, when Olivia came home from work, she found an inconspicuous envelope left on her doorstep. She opened it cautiously and discovered a small letter accompanied by a check to cover some accumulated debts and some provisions for the children. The signature, R. Hawthorne. Olivia felt her eyes well up. This gesture wasn't simply financial, it was a symbol of respect, recognition, and consideration. For the first time in a long time, she felt there were people who saw her value beyond her social circumstances. She thought long and hard about what this meant for her and her children. Maya and Ethan were amazed by the unexpected gift, but Olivia was careful to explain, it wasn't just money, it was a lesson in dignity and self-worth. A few days later, Richard called. He wanted to know how she and the children were doing, not to check that he had helped, but to check in sincerely. Olivia was surprised by this attention. she had never known someone who combined richness and humanity with such delicacy. Richard's discreet gesture had an immediate impact on Olivia's life. She was able to pay off some debts, buy school supplies for her children, and breathe a little more freely. But it wasn't just the material help that touched her, it was the recognition she deserved, the respect she was shown. Olivia understood then that this night had triggered something much bigger, a change of perspective, a newfound confidence in herself and in her ability to navigate between two worlds that once seemed impossible to bring together. And for Richard, this experience had been eye-opening. He had understood that true wealth lay not in one's millions or properties, but in the ability to see human value and act with sincerity and respect. Olivia and Richard, each in their own world, now knew that this fragile but sincere bond would continue to influence them, transforming their vision of life and human relationships. A few weeks had passed since that fateful night. Olivia had resumed her life with her children, but something had changed within her. She felt more confident, stronger, as if this experience with Richard had opened a door she had never dared to cross. One afternoon, as she was coming home from work, Olivia found an elegant package on her doorstep. This time, it wasn't just an envelope, it was a carefully wrapped box, with a small card bearing her name. She opened it slowly. Inside was a watch for her and 2 bracelets from Maya and Ethan, along with a note from Richard. For all 3 of you, so that you know that dignity, sincerity, and strength deserve to be recognized and celebrated. Thank you for tonight, Olivia. It will always be etched in my memory as a moment when I truly saw someone. Olivia felt an intense emotion rise within her. This gesture wasn't an attempt to seduce or buy her, it was a tribute to her worth, her courage, and her authenticity. She understood that Richard had not only respected her boundaries, but had also found a way to honor her and her children. She smiled, tears in her eyes, imagining the scene. Richard, a man accustomed to absolute control over his life, had chosen to show his vulnerability and admiration with a simple but deeply meaningful gesture. That night, Olivia told her children everything. She explained that they had just learned an important lesson: true wealth was not money, property, or power, but respect, honesty, and the ability to recognize the value of others. Richard, for his part, had learned that he could connect with someone beyond their status and wealth, that genuine emotions could transcend social differences. And while Olivia and Richard's lives continued in their own worlds, one thing was certain: this night would remain an indelible memory, a bridge between 2 realities, a reminder that dignity and humanity are the greatest riches one can possess. Olivia watched her children play in the living room, their bracelets sparkling on their wrists. A peaceful smile lit up her face. For her, that night had not only been an unusual experience, it had been the beginning of a new beginning, a beginning where self-confidence, dignity, and sincerity would henceforth guide every step of her life. And in the glittering, gilded world of Richard Hawthorne, one thing remained etched in his mind, the most valuable lesson of all: sometimes, true greatness lies in respecting and admiring those you believe are different from yourself.